The hate for Black Myth Wukong is about to reach an all-time peak, specifically because the game is actually good. And that's what we're hearing from a lot of reviews that are coming out for Black Myth Wukong recently, that this is actually a stellar game that is not biting into the Elden Ring Dark Souls stereotype of being a Souls-like game. No, it's doing its own thing with a mixture and combinations of games like God of War, Dark Souls, and of course like Sekiro, with a twist of things that are uniquely Chinese. And I think this is what is impressing a lot of Western video game reviewers that are heaping praise on this game, saying it's one of the best games of the year. And I think this is what we're seeing now with the review embargo lifted. A lot of people are praising this game, loving this game, and you see quietly the haters that want to give this game a terrible review have to begrudgingly give it an okay review. And that's what we're seeing from IGN and a whole list of other video game reviewers out there that are known to actually consistently putting out hit pieces against the developer Game Science, saying it's a racist, misogynistic organization with scant proof or any evidence saying that's actually the truth. And I think we've been hearing about this for the past 6 to 8 months, a whole list of grievances against the Game Science developer for no particular reason, and no one was actually responding or reading these articles about this. It seems like there was a concerted effort to tear down this game. And of course we have the alleged story of Sweet Baby Inc. asking for $7 million in consultancy fees to add diversity and inclusivity into the Chinese mythological world of Black Myth Wukong. Of course, we all laughed at this notion, but soon after they allegedly refused this offer, we got 6 to 8 months of attacks against this game. You can see this, over 6-7 articles coming out monthly just attacking this game, saying it's misogynistic, has workplace issues, continuous attacks from games journalists that is usually associated with some of these consultancy firms. And I think that's a suspicious thing people concluded when they saw these attacks, at least people with an astute mind. And seeing some of the success for Black Myth Wukong after it lifted its review embargo, you still see some of the maligned and hatred for this game seethe out of particular reviews. Screen Rant, which came out with the dumbest review that everyone's been laughing about and complaining about, because they included some of the notions that we believe these political progressive activists thought that they needed to include in this Chinese mythological game, Black Myth Wukong. Diversity, inclusivity, they thought these were the paramount things that Black Myth Wukong game developer Game Science had to put into the game. And you see these reviewers Screen Rant saying that's the exact thing that is missing in this game. It lacks inclusivity, it lacks diversity, it lacks the things that have nothing to do with the game in its reality of mythological creatures and non-human beings in the world. What type of diversity are you asking for? We're playing as a stone monkey. We're playing as a mythological monkey fighting these monsters and dragons in almost a fantastical world that is filled with diversity. And I'm thinking they just want to see the blue-haired progressive political activists in the game in this Chinese mythological world, because that's the only thing that's lacking in diversity in this game. And I think this is the thing, people are frustrated with some of these gaming journalists, where they're so focused on their activism that they can't even enjoy a game that is doing something wholly unique and individualistic in a sea of gaming in the Western games development sphere that is lacking creativity. So I think this is what's bringing people together to love this game. This is why it's getting a lot of praise. That's why people are enjoying this game for what it is. But it is one of the most hated games of the year. Even though it's getting these top critic ratings, Open Critic's doing amazing, a lot of the people love it there. But when you look at Metacritic and these large social media publications, gaming magazines, gaming journalists, and their perspective on it, it's receiving a similar amount of hate that Stellar Blade got when it was released. If you know anything about Stellar Blade, it was the much anticipated game from Korea that a lot of people loved. It was a massive success for the developer Shift Up, making it over $50 million in royalties and improving the company's situation where it could IPO, make $500 million at its initial public offering. This was a massive success, but of course the critics came in soft and lambasted this game, saying it was misogynistic, it was trying to appeal to the male gaze, and that is wrong in modern society. But if you look at the user score, it was at 9.2. People love this game, and I think that's the situation we're seeing with Black Myth Wukong. It's at 82, similar to Stellar Blade's 81% on Metacritic. And I think we haven't seen the user score yet because it hasn't been released yet, but I'm expecting something very high in a similar place as Stellar Blade. And I think we can see that this is the dichotomy now in the modern game reviewing space, where you can't really trust the Metacritics and all these other critical organizations, because they're more focused on their activism than actually giving the gamers perspective that is pure and simple and straight about what the content of a game is about. And I think that's the situation that we're seeing with Stellar Blade and Black Myth Wukong, where they're gonna have lower scores. I think they just have to settle on an 8 because they don't want to lose their credibility. I think that's why we're seeing some outlets like IGN give an average 8 score, or Kotaku, who hasn't released a score yet but may give it a 8 or 7. This is the typical score that we see for these games that are pretty good, but they don't want to give them that much credit. And I think that's what we're seeing here with Black Myth Wukong. It's getting that rating that we all expect these large publications that have their own modus operandi when it comes to gaming. They have their own perspective, their own political activism they want to inject into the gaming sphere. IGN was one of the chief purveyors of attacking this game consistently, and to see them give this game an 8 makes you think, okay, they're probably trying to preserve their credibility in this situation. Obviously, I think that's the smart thing to do. People already perceive these game journalists as fake. If they gave this game, which was good, terrible rating, people wouldn't trust them anymore. And I think that's a thing that a lot of these game journalists are still depending on. They're depending on people giving them credibility, and unfortunately they still are getting that credibility check mark because they do these small handouts to the games that they actually hate. They give it an average score, and then they go off to bully some smaller games that don't have the presence to actually get support from the gamer base. And I think this is what we saw with Days Gone. Was an incredible game that got much maligned and destroyed by these games journalists because it didn't assimilate to the modern audience gaming tropes that they wanted it to be. It's about an average white guy trying to fight for his girl and family in a zombie apocalypse. This is something completely against the trope of diversity, inclusivity that a lot of these activists want to see in gaming. And of course, the game director said the game was attacked because it wasn't woke enough, and probably he had conversations with a lot of these consultancy firms and rejected them, and this game was summarily destroyed. And I think this bullying tactic was applied to Black Myth Wukong, but it got so much attention from the player base. If they gave it a bad rating, people will destroy these review factories right now. And I think seeing this actually get a good rating is showing that they are aware that the gamers don't trust them and they don't want to lose that confidence. So they gave Black Myth Wukong largely positive praise, and I think this is a good thing and a bad thing. I was hoping they would destroy this game so these gaming journalists lose the complete trust of the gamers, because this game was going to be successful regardless. And I think something similar happened with Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade was going to be successful regardless, so they had to give it majority 8 reviews because they knew players were going to love this game. And I think the same thing happened with Black Myth Wukong. Too much attention to the game, they're forced to give it a good rating. If you don't give the game as much attention as it needs, they get destroyed like Days Gone. And I think this was going to be a Days Gone situation until the gamers just kept talking about this game. The hype was unstoppable, so they had to conform to the fan base itself, and it just shows how much power the fan base has. We can force these game developers to actually listen. We can force these game reviewers to step back and change their stance on these situations. And I think we still have some terrible reviews out there. We still have the blue hair mob attacking this game. You still have Tech Radar. You still have Screen Rant demanding for inclusivity. You could just look at some of the pictures of the people that are reviewing this game. You see quickly that it's just people that are not interested in this type of game in the first place. They're there to push their political activism. And I think that's what we're seeing with Black Myth Wukong, with a whole host of people that just have no business reviewing games, that are not there to even play games. They are leading to the downfall of video games because they're reducing the content of games, because a lot of game developers are trying to placate to the game journalist that doesn't like playing games. And I think a lot of gamers would have been served if the credibility of these gaming journalists were removed, but that's obviously not the case anymore, at least for now. But I think it will happen eventually. We saw this happen with The First Descendant. The First Descendant came out and it got terrible mixed reviews, but it still became one of the biggest games of the summer. And I think this is just showing the lack of power with the games journalist media right now, where people are just ignoring them. They're playing the games. they don't care what they have to say for the most part, and I think that is a positive thing for them to lose their influence, and I'm happy to see it happen. So tell me what you think about Black Myth Wukong. Black Myth Wukong is looking to be one of the better games of the year. People are loving the gameplay. People are saying there's over 90 hours of gameplay if you really do everything in the game, and it's just showing how much care was put into this game, and I love that Game Science is getting the flowers it deserves from a lot of the reviewers that are not bought and paid for, that are praising this game, saying it's one of the best games of the year. And I'm happy for the developer. I'm happy for Chinese developers in general, because they're making great games now, and it's putting competition, it's putting heat against the Western game developer to actually match them. But you tell me what you think about the situation. What do you think about Black Myth Wukong? Still getting good reviews, but still having those complaints about diversity and inclusivity, and just telling you that is the main goal of the games journalists today, to actually influence the gaming industry in a negative way for all of us gamers. But you leave a comment, tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.